Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. We are joined by our friend Dr. Matthew Bunson, who joins us every Thursday to talk about current events in light of church teachings and church news. We have quite a few news stories to catch up on. One of the things that we probably will not have a lot of time to touch on that I do want to address has to do with the USCCB responding to now Vice President J.D. Vance's comments pertaining to immigration. Now, needless to say, this is a prudential judgment issue, and that means that we are actually allotted a spectrum of response. And the responses have to be grounded in objective morality and the dignity of the human person, to be sure. We also want to make sure that as we move forward in these issues, in the attempt of trying to establish strong borders and remediate the issues that we're facing, honoring human dignity is one thing, and after we at the very least, as we keep that at the forefront of our mind, we also want to ensure that we have conversations about having strong borders. Because the fact of the matter is strong borders have always been part of an implicit understanding of the preservation of the common good of every nation. And so it is the juridical responsibility of an elected government and the notion of a democratic republican process to preserve and uphold and flourish the common good in a nation, which is not the sum total goods for the most amount of people, but for everyone within the nation. And so when you consider the equitable reality of a nation, when you consider the continued upbuilding of a nation, strong borders become a key consideration. And proper legislation, the Church has always supported that. And so as we discern these things well, we look to the responses of the bishops in adhering to the dignity of the human person, and we move forward understanding that some of these issues are actually difficult to navigate, and that's fine to admit. Now, as we move on from conversations with Dr. Matthew Bunson, we're also going to be talking with Monica Ashour and John Paul II's Theology of the Body. It's so easy to construe the theology of the body as this extremely difficult teaching that is best left to certain experts. The fact of the matter is, John Paul II was so fatherly and pastoral that there's a heritage here for all of us to appreciate, pertaining to the maleness and femaleness of human persons and the complementarity of the sexes in marriage and the family, and all of this after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Thursday, January 30th. It's the feast of David Galvan Bermudez. Today's news is brought to you by Ave Maria University. Your vocation location is at avemaria.edu. Federal officials say they haven't recovered the black boxes from the deadly mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. The National Transportation Safety Board providing an update about the crash between the American Airlines plane and the Black Hawk chopper that is feared to have killed 67 people. Chair Jennifer Hamady said they know the recorders are there and they'll eventually retrieve them. President Trump says air travel safety standards were lower during previous administrations. He criticized former President Obama and Biden for putting politics first and then declared that air traffic controllers will face a higher standard to work.
My administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent.
He said he'll restore Americans' faith in air travel. President Trump has signed another executive order, this one calling for the preparation of a facility at Guantanamo Bay to be used for deported migrants.
The president is right. Let's put him in Guantanamo.
Texas Republican Chip Roy says the plan is both creative and innovative, but the president of Cuba has other words. He called it an act of brutality. The order will have the Department of Defense and Homeland Security prepare a 30,000 migrant facility at the prison site in Cuba. And Pope Francis says he'll dedicate a day to help protecting millions of children who are still without rights. The first ever world meeting on children's rights will be held at the Vatican February 3rd. The event will include 7 panels that have specific topics focusing on the rights of children, including access to education and protection from violence. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Dr. Matthew Bunson joins us every week talking about church news and current events in light of church teachings. And this week, we've got some hopeful news and also some things that we need to have our concerns privy to at the very least. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Oh, always good to be with you.
So, this whole thing with the deep fakes about Pope Francis, I'm really glad we picked up on it and started talking about it, because undoubtedly this is going to start presenting some true ethical problems.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I think two things have happened sort of in succession. The first is that Pope Francis, as we've all noted, has been talking and expressing his concerns about AI, artificial intelligence, for quite some time. In fact, you could argue that he was slightly ahead of the curve, at least in raising a lot of the ethical concerns that scientists have been raising for a while. But at the same time, talking about the opportunities and the road that lies ahead for us, and are we going to listen to the judgment and wisdom of the church on this?
Yep.
But then that was followed up by something very concrete, and that's Antiqua et Nova, this 30-page document that came out just a couple of days ago. It's a combination of work by the DDF, or the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, and the Dicastery for Culture and Education. So it's Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the DDF, and then Cardinal Jose Tolentino de Mondoncia, who's prefect of the Culture and Education. And I found the document striking. I found it an interesting read, and I think it's going to actually prove to be something of a valuable document, not just for Catholics.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and I'm very, very glad that the church saw fit to create a response so promptly. And given that this is a prompt response, the document itself is very well written, at least in my humble opinion. Paragraph 3 launches right into the fact that we have to keep in mind that the goal of this technology is to imitate human intelligence that designed it, and so it raises that core concern.
Well, that's absolutely right. And you say something that's really important, that it was designed by human intelligence. It is itself not human intelligence. Yep. And as a product of that, we have to recognize there are obvious anthropological and theological and ethical challenges that attend any use of AI. And we can't fall into the trap of anthropomorphizing AI, which we're already seeing happen. I mean, it's a bizarre example, but we are seeing something of a phenomenon of young men and women socially isolated who are essentially developing relationships with the AI, the bots or their AI software programs on their phones or broader. As a substitute for an authentic, meaningful human relationship. So that's just one small example of the risks of artificial intelligence. And I think this document really does a solid job of first explaining what is artificial intelligence, but then also looking at the risks and the opportunities of it.
Yep. And we can acknowledge, I think we're at a point of the conversation where no one denies that there are true benefits to the development of this technology. We're already seeing people reap those benefits in small and great ways. And it seems like in the interest of considering the benefits, the conversations on the ethical issues and even the potential detriments that we are already seeing and will continue to see, those are conversations that seem to be either eclipsed or unwilling to be had. And that's a concern.
Yeah, there's a realism in this document that I appreciate, and that is, look, there's no going back. AI is here. We are not that old classic maxim of trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Well, the genie's out. Now we have to make sure that the genie doesn't destroy everything. And the genie metaphor, I think, to torture it a bit more, is also apt here because there is a certain desire for wish fulfillment in some of this AI technology, that this is going to be the road for creating some sort of a utopia. And that's not going to happen. And there are so many risks attendant to it, and this document lays that out. But we have to have, from the very beginning, and there are many in agreement within the scientific community. I think of Elon Musk, for example, who has himself warned about the risks of AI, that we have to have ethics in the development and the use of AI, or we really are flirting with potential disaster. And I'm not talking about that We're not looking at the Terminator.
You read my mind, Matthew. I was going to make a Terminator reference.
Exactly. But I think what it does pose, at least in the short term, we don't know what's going to happen even 5-10 years from now with AI technology. But in the short term, it does pose these risks of privacy issues, of protecting the human person, of AI and warfare, of damaging our relationship with God, but also of deepening the social fragmentation that we have that is all around us right now anyway, of that relationship, as I was just talking about, these young people who have a relationship with AI. And also of posing real developmental challenges for children who are just sort of handed off to some form of AI as a way of instructing them.
Yep.
Again, damaging their social and intellectual development.
Yep. And so, if you may pardon my extending that inside joke, Skynet's already gone live. We don't have to worry about Skynet getting self-aware, though, because as this document really addresses, this isn't real intelligence. And therefore, even if it passes things like the Turing test and it seems to be human, we're not dealing with a real intelligence, and it has limitations.
It does. But we also have to be very conscious of the fact that we don't know where the technology can lead. We have seen similar discussions, for example, about cloning technology, and that continues to proceed apace to the great risk of understanding and a proper fulfillment of what it means to provide ethical care. And what are the boundaries for cloning? That's just one example. AI itself also offers, because of the immensity potentially of opportunities created by it. But as somebody was pointing out, it's kind of a meme, but it's true that AI, initially it was thought that AI would help all of us to do nothing but be poets and philosophers, and not do manual labor. Now, in fact, AI is proving that it will do the poetry and philosophy, and we're left to do the manual labor. So it's I think one of the things about this document is that it does keep coming back to the relationship that we have to have, and it asks those very specific questions. But at the heart of this, I think it keeps coming back to the supreme value and how does it help and support and promote the value of the dignity of every human being and the fullness of the human vocation. And if we lose sight of that, then I think we are going to be in a very difficult position as AI continues to develop.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. We more than anything, I think what AI presents the rest of humanity right now is the challenge to cling true to those things that make us human, make us truly human. I'd like to pivot our conversation a little just to open this conversation, and we can pick up on the other side of the break, about Archbishop Anastasios of Albania, his passing in 95 and his legacy.
This is one of those remarkable church leaders that essentially flew under the radar for decades. He was somebody who, as leader of the Orthodox community of Albania, presided over, quite literally, the reconstruction of the Christian faith in what was one of the darkest and most evil, and they were all incredibly evil, of the Soviet states, of the satellite communist, atheistic Marxist states. Albania was a terrible place, and it fell to him to help rebuild it. And he did so with such gentleness and commitment. And he was also one of the great figures in ecumenical dialogue, which is one of the reasons why Pope Francis saw him as such a great partner in dialogue. But he was also very familiar with interreligious dialogue, because he was himself something of an expert in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Confucianism, and in Islam. So this is it's a passing at 95 of a great figure, and unfortunately sometimes it takes their passing for us to recognize them.
That's true. And one thing that can be said about him, just to put a bow on that conversation, is that he was a true spiritual father. My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson, who is going through with us church news and current events in light of church teaching. We're continuing this conversation on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. I'm Ox Peter.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
My daughter told me she was published in a scientific journal as an undergrad. I'm so proud of her. The world needs Catholic physicists, and my daughter's going to be one of them.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Italy aficionado Teresa Tamio's newest book is coming soon to the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tamio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections, Teresa Tamio will be found soon at AveMariaRadio.net.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. So, Matthew, I want to open this segment with some truly good news, which is the laywoman visionary who was friends with Padre Pio. She's been declared venerable now, and so there's cause open for the consideration of her canonization.
Yeah, that's right. As you say, she was a lay mystic. She had a vision of our Lord and the Virgin Mary. She was very close friends with St. Pio Pietrelcina, obviously Padre Pio. And it's nice that, and this has been a hallmark, especially the modern popes, of these causes that have developed very rapidly, not imprudently, but that these causes are moving appropriately through the dicastery. And in this case, her cause itself now, according to the dicastery for the causes of saints, with this declaration of her as venerable, it's obviously, to my mind, one of the key steps toward eventual beatification and canonization. So essentially, it's the recognition on the part of the dicastery of her remarkable life and the affirmation of her pursuit and living of heroic virtue. In other words, she lived the virtues heroically.
Right.
And so that means that we had this whole diocesan phase that was then advanced to Rome. And that's so key because now we will await the confirmation, we hope soon, of a miracle. But her relationship, I think, is a demonstration of how saints, like St. Padre Pio, often are surrounded by other saints. There's that old maxim that saints tend to travel in packs or groups, and I think this is a recognition of that as well.
Yep. And I couldn't agree more. And it's so wonderful to think about the fact that Luigiana Siniapi's life was also touched by Padre Pio's and vice versa. And so between this friendship, between knowing each other, but also the fact that they individually lived lives of heroic virtue, and we get to celebrate that in our lifetime, it's something we ought to be grateful for.
Well, that's right. And looking at her life, we can see that she had this friendship with Padre Pio, who was himself obviously a saint, but she also had a profound spiritual friendship and devotion to other great saints, in particular Francis of Assisi. That would make sense. But also someone like Gemma Galgani and Therese of Lisieux. So she had a deep-seated, deep spiritual life that was very Eucharistic. And in that sense, too, we can see different eras, of course, but a similarity with another person who's going to be canonized very soon, and that's Carlo Acutis, who had this great devotion to the Eucharist. He had this great love of the Blessed Mother, but his love of the Eucharist in particular, driving him to create these websites. His death at the age of 15, he's a perfect role model for the modern age in exactly the same way that she is a reminder of that saints are not of the ancient past, but they're people that we can recognize today. And so in that sense, there is the 2 points that John Paul II always made. One is that saints are universal. You will find them everywhere, but they're also not something of the past. So these 20th century saints, we now have 21st century saints. It's a reminder to us of the modernity, the importance of holiness today.
Yep, and heroic virtue lived out in every facet of human history, including our present-day times.
That's right.
Let's pivot a little to talk about, the German bishops.
As Napoleon once said, from the sublime to the ridiculous is but a step.
It is about a step. And I can see what's going on here. So the Berlin office just released approved a motion for stronger border controls. And so the German Catholic Bishops' Conference has chosen to be silent and distance themselves from that position.
Well, that's right. So by way of some context, there are two things that are happening. The first is that there is a very significant election coming up in just a few weeks in February. I think they're on February 23rd. Federal elections for Germany. And part of what has alarmed many in Germany, in particular some of the German bishops and some of the German Catholic establishment, the same establishment I would point out that also gave us the German synodal way, is the emergence of what they call this German AfD, which has become they label it a far-right party. There's a lot of discussion and disagreement over what exactly the AfD is, but it is certainly populist. It is the German expression of what we're seeing in other countries, I think in particular in France with Marine Le Pen, her party, the National Rally, as well as Geert Wilders' Party for Freedom in the Netherlands, that they are really warning against and trying to move against the phenomenon of mass migration into Europe, the radical presence, the presence of many radical Islamists in these countries, and what they see as a deliberately, aggressively secular ideology of leftist, to put it in quotes, wokeism. And that emergence then has alarmed many, certainly, as I said, in the German Catholic establishment, which is why when the German parliament just approved by a narrow margin what is essentially a non-binding motion demanding much stronger borders and asylum rules in anticipation of what will be coming or what's on the ballot, basically, next month for the federal elections, that the Berlin office of the German Bishops' Catholic Conference issued a strong condemnation. And what we're now seeing is the very clear split among the German bishops and among German Catholicism as to how to react to these two things, of the movement against this mass migration, but then also the emergence also of these populist parties. So that's all playing out now as a number of German bishops are really trying to distance themselves from this rather controversial statement coming out from one element of the German bishops.
Right. And now I understand their concerns. I see where they can stand in terms of prudential judgment when it comes to issues such as immigration. But the German Bishops' Conference declaring that the AfD is leaning towards an ideology of ethnic nationalism, that's the kind of thing you want to be careful of in putting out a public statement, given Germany's very recent history, no less.
Well, exactly. And the German bishops have themselves been strong in declaring what they see as the AfD as unelectable for Christians. Now, that's a very strong statement for them to make. Now, in fairness, a lot of Catholic members of that party have come under a great deal of pressure from their own bishops. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that this does is it strengthens the hand in many ways of the AFD as partners with what would many anticipate to be the party that is likely to win the largest of the CDU, as it's called, mm-hmm. in the German elections. But polling would indicate that the AFD has now emerged as the second most popular party in Germany, which means that should the elections go the way that many anticipated, you are looking at the AFD as wielding immense political power. And I think a number of the German bishops see that there is real peril in making these types of statements and not speaking with any kind of a unified front in dealing with what are emerging political trends, not just in Germany, but across Europe.
Right. Now, given that we're running out of time, Matthew, I just want to pivot very quickly to Cardinal Dolan's statement against J.D. Vance on the same issue of immigration.
That's right. And what we're seeing here is that the U.S. bishops, I think, are trying to create some sort of a unified front mm-hmm. In dealing with the very swift movements by the newly established Trump administration on a number of fronts, including, of course, immigration. And Cardinal Dolan used his show to criticize Vice President J.D. Vance's own criticisms of the USCCB. So I think this is something we're going to be seeing a lot of. Again, there are going to be areas of agreement, strong agreement, but areas of some disagreement between the U.S. bishops and the Trump administration, which is as it always is.
Yeah. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. There's undoubtedly more you and I will talk about in the future.
Oh, yes. It's going to be a busy 4 years.
My guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
We are the pro-life generation, passionate about building the culture of life in our healthcare and in our nation. But not all healthcare options are equally pro-life, and some provide morally objectionable procedures. CMF Curo is different. CMF Curo is a pro-life Catholic healthcare ministry providing a pathway for its members to build the culture of life in their healthcare choices, not destroy it. Learn more about CMF Curo at mycatholichealthcare.com. That's mycatholichealthcare.com. This program brought to you in part by the town of Ave Maria, Florida.
Ave Maria, a big kind of small town. A golf cart friendly, ride your bike everywhere kind of town with something for everyone. Resort style amenities, 2 golf courses, shopping, and dining in our town center. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at the core of the community and a wide range of homes to meet your family's needs. Visitors are welcome. More information can be found at avemaria.com. Ave Maria, a big kind of small town.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I went to Las Vegas years and years ago for one of these cable shows. And I was shocked to see all these old ladies in their 70s and 80s getting off that plane, running for a slot machine. You don't have a chance to win. They're all fixed. I know, my uncle used to have slot machines.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
How is the priestly prayer of Jesus unique in the economy of salvation? According to the Catholic Catechism, it is unique because it reveals the ever-present prayer of Jesus and at the same time contains what Jesus teaches us about our prayer to our Father. As Jesus fulfills his Father's plan of love, he gives us a glimpse of the depth of his filial prayer when he agonizes in the garden, "Abba, Not my will, but thine. His last words on the cross exhibit prayer and gift of self as one when he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Later, with a loud cry, he surrenders his spirit. All the troubles for all times, states the Catechism, of humanity enslaved by sin and death, all the petitions and intercessions of salvation history are summed up in this cry of the incarnate Word. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Our family had been going through crisis. Little by little, we just found ourselves drifting completely away. I was afraid to go back. I cried the first time I received the sacraments again. Cried because I was back and because I had allowed God to become a part of me again. It's united our family. There's peace in our home that we didn't have before.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for any reason, visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Pope St. John Paul II designed his theology of the body for a universal audience, and that's why he taught them during his Wednesday addresses. It continues to reach young and old, men and women. Monica Ashour has taught the theology of the body to people in all walks of life for more than 27 years, and she joins us to share very practical phrases and approaches that she uses to bring this teaching to life. Monica is president, co-founder, and international speaker for the Theology of the Body Evangelization Team, author of 28 books, including the pre-K through 8 grade series, The Body Matters. You can learn more about her work at tobet.org. Monica, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And as someone who has taught quite a bit and researched quite a bit on the theology of the body, I must say I love meeting kindred spirits who know how to appreciate John Paul II's legacy. And maybe that's a place we can begin to unpack, that this was this wondrous theological time bomb that the Holy Spirit exploded across the world as this benevolent response to the ugliness of the sexual revolution and the denigration of the human person.
I totally agree with that. In fact, Pope John Paul's first words that he wrote Theology in Polish, were, Maria, you are all beautiful. And so to fly in the face of the ugliness and disrespect for others, like his first words of the Theology were to Mother Mary. Mm-hmm. And it's changed the world. And I love the way you put time bomb. That's George Weigel, the papal biographer. He said it'll probably have to happen after his death, although I think we started it before his death. But it is sweeping the nation. I gave a talk 2 nights ago at Hillsdale College. It was an ecumenical talk, and Catholics and Protestants alike, they love theology of the body. And so I'm just blessed to be part of this adventure to, get this time bomb exploded.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm very glad that you're doing it. I approach this from the lens of of biblical theology, covenant theology, so I have a great appreciation for John Paul II's tackling of this, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation. When we take a look at the scriptures, especially Genesis 1 and 2, which John Paul II spends a copious amount of time unpacking, what we come to see is this magnificent dignity of the human person, the human body, and God's wondrous plan for the covenant of marriage and complementarity of the sexes. So just unpack all of that for us. No, I know.
You want me to do that in 5 minutes? But you're right. Like, the first thing that pops in my head is just, part of what Pope John Paul gave us with his pontificate is not only the objective truth, but the personal experience. And as you might remember, in the first creation story, Pope John Paul emphasizes that's more the objective truth, so the 7 days of creation. But then the second creation story, that's more, he says, about like that personal experience. And so he said, this is almost a direct quote from Theology Body, that Adam was in search of his identity. And what is more necessary now with identity politics now, and everyone wonders, like, who am I? And so let's search who we are, personal identity, but also let's not forget the objective truth. Yeah. That God made us in his image and likeness, and starting with the body, which is why I emphasize the truth of the body so much because I think we skip over the body. But yeah, I'm all about, Genesis 1 and 2 and also 3, of course.
Mm-hmm. And so let's dive deeper into this question of identity, right? Because that's one of those buzzwords that makes its way around society, sometimes around even the church and the faith. But in a very particular way, as it's used in the culture, it's meant to express this inner movement of the person that's completely ambiguous, and as if reality and the body are supposed to then be forcefully conformed to this weird, fluid, ever-changing thing that makes up a person's identity, when factually, throughout most of human history until very recently, we've always understood that man is essentially body soul integrated, and so my who-ness, my identity is my body and my soul, and so I'm a man, and that's a big part of who I am and my identity.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it reminds me of the talk I gave to the college students where I was basically saying, like, I use the word sentimentality, that we think that our modern culture unrightly, and mistakenly says that whatever I feel, whatever I think is my identity. And so I totally agree with what you're saying. And I guess what I would add is Pope John Paul wanted us to focus on the truth of the body, that we are embodied spirits, you might say. He doesn't use those terms, but he does say, like, he speaks about self-awareness. He says there should be self-awareness and self-determination based on being a body, is the way he puts it. And so I think he repackages St. Thomas as Aquinas, intellect and the will, and he adds the word body. And as I give in my talks, I'm like, how many times does he say the word soul? And the answer is 55 times. How about the word spirit? 91 times. And the word body? 1,319 times. And so I think what that shows is not only should we remind ourselves that we are body, soul, I think what he's doing, he gives us a theology of the body. He was a smart guy. He could have said theology of the person. He could have said theology of soul and body, but he chose the body. Why? He uses the word detachment as a negative. So whereas John of the Cross, detachment is, we should be detached from materialism, pride, greed. The way Pope John Paul says the word detachment is we think the body doesn't have meaning anymore. And so we are detached. And then he further on, and this reminds me of your lead thing about identity, your question to me. He says we have difficulty, that is, modern man has difficulty in identifying with his own body. And then he adds, and the body of others. Right. So, in my mind, we shouldn't stay with the body, soul, way of expressing ourselves. But the fact that I like the word body, person, and hyphenated. But let's not skip over the body. And then when we say the word body, so people have trouble with this because they think I only mean biological. I mean, actually, the way Jesus Christ himself says, this is my body. Does he only mean the biological? No. He means the visible sign of the invisible, complete person that he is, being a gift to us. Right. And so, to me, that's why I named the whole curriculum that I made for preschool through 8th grade, The Body Matters, because it's actually giving a sacramental view of reality by going against detachment and speaking the truth of the body.
Right, and the reason why John Paul II spoke this truth of the body in his entire pedagogy and catechesis was, in a sense, a polemic against the ebbs and flows of the cultural current that was over-glorifying the Epicurean way of treating the body, so much so that a theology of the body was completely cast out. And so his updating of this, in this case, Christian anthropology, was a response, to be sure, but it was a renewed way of viewing the entirety of the human person.
I love that. And I would say, just to remind the listeners that, when you say updating, dogma never contradicts the previous dogma. And so this development of dogma, as Cardinal Newman says, is so necessary for right now. I mean, I think I heard this from another speaker that we had Augustine in the 300s, and then 800 years later we had St. Thomas Aquinas, and 800 years later we need Pope John Paul, because it's the milieu in which we live that theologians often have to like give a different emphasis.
Right.
And so I think we're in a neo-Gnostic culture where we don't think the body matters. We you know, as R.R. Reno of First Things Magazine says, he says the body is an enemy to freedom, according to most, you know, people in the culture. Like, how dare you tell me what to do with my body? I get to do whatever I want with the body. So it's like this nominalism that is permeating our culture.
Thank you, Monica. My guest, Monica Ashour, president, co-founder, and international speaker for Theology of the Body Evangelization Team, author of 28 books. We are talking about John Paul II's theology of the body as being deeply pastoral and applicable to our modern life. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Maybe you've been hearing a lot about the need to make a spiritual communion while participating from home in a live-streamed or broadcast Mass. By asking for spiritual communion, we are acknowledging that the Holy Mass is the perfect, best way to worship God. The priest intercedes perfectly for us with God the Father because he acts in persona Christi. This is the time to see that through the priest's representation of Christ's sacrifice on Calvary, we are never separated from our Lord. Jesus, I embrace you and unite myself wholly to you.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
I've seen the difference in my son since he's been at Ave Maria. He's happy, he's excited about what he's going to do with his degree, and he's living his faith.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
While I was working at this Protestant station, in the midst of being challenged by former Catholics, I received this book from Ascension Press, and I became hooked on apologetics. I discovered Catholic Answers. I discovered EWTN. I started listening to all these programs. I would just go to local Catholic bookstores and grab every single book I could on apologetics. Deep in my heart, I knew that it was true, and I trusted the Church for her 2,000 years of teaching. I knew a certain amount of Scripture, but I wasn't able to defend it as well. That period of my life where I worked in Christian radio and was challenged by former Catholics, as painful as it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it really forced me to dive in more deeply and fall even more in love with the Catholic Church.
Catholic Connections, Teresa Tomeo. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Christ is the Answer with Father John Riccardo.
John chapter 11, verses 21 to 26. This is the story of Lazarus. Lazarus has died. Lazarus is one of his best friends. Just before this passage, we hear the news that Martha and Mary send word to Jesus that the one you love is sick. And the next line in the scripture is, now because Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stayed where he was. His friend's in need, he can heal, they've seen him heal before, and yet somehow because he loves him, he stays, and Lazarus dies. And then Jesus shows up 3 days later and is greeted by Martha and Mary, who confront him with the words, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would never have died." Rather applicable for many of us in our lives. We ask the Lord to do one thing because we're certain it is what we think is best, when in fact he has something which far surpasses what we ask for. The challenge is, in waiting for that to happen, we go through very trying times, which oftentimes makes us wonder, does he really care?
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm talking to Monica Ashour about the Theology of the Body of John Paul II and its pastoral implications. So, Monica, let's pick up where we left off. We were talking about the fact that when we take a look at the human person, so we know that the Catechism, the language of the Church, and John Paul II affirms the unicity of the body-soul composite, that this is the person, this is what makes up the person. We have a culture now that swings to two extremes. You've got large facet of the culture that argues the interior self is the real self and do whatever you want to the body to conform to that. And the other facet that argues the body is the real self, and so have sensory pleasure to your heart's content because that's the meaning of life. And that's what John Paul II is trying to answer, that the virtuous path is the integration of the whole person.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I would also add his emphasis is on seeing the body as a sacrament. That's a direct quote. And so what is a sacrament? Well, it's this visible sign of an invisible reality bringing about that reality. Is a kind of a TOB way of saying it. And the way Pope Benedict puts it, who I think he keeps the pontificate going of Pope John Paul, and that is he speaks about the transparency of the biological toward the eternal. Mm-hmm. So the transparency of the biological toward the eternal. It's another way of saying what you're saying, like that middle path. But again, he starts with the biological as that which what we need in order to get in touch with the transcendent, our soul and divinity as well. And so both of those. And I love what Pope Benedict also, unpacks for us. He speaks about the person being historical, biological, and communal. Mm-hmm. So again, those things, you can't have those things unless you have the composite of body and soul. But I would say with the sacramental view, we start with that which is sense perceptible, that which is visible. And that's why I think Pope John Paul names his work, the Theology of the Body. So fascinating.
Right. So this expands the conversation, right, to this sacramental worldview, that the material order does in fact point to a reality that's greater than itself, and that's what the sacraments themselves do. They present to us sensory encounters with how the divine touches, in this case, the material and the non-eternal man, so that we can come to encounter the eternal God.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The way Pope Benedict puts it in Theology of the Liturgy. Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite books. He says, what would be the point of the incarnation if God could just plop, down into our, maybe we would say our inner feelings, his will. Instead, the incarnation makes sense since, the Word was made flesh. And so the way he puts it in Theology of the Body, that he says, at the incarnation, when the Word became flesh, it's like the body came into theology as if through the main door. Mm-hmm. So the body was there, with Adam and Eve with creation, but through the main door now is what theology occurs, because of course all of our sacraments are tied to the incarnation, just like all the sacraments are tied to Jesus' body on the cross. And what does his body say? All of me I give to you, won't you receive from me? Which is, again, we could even tie that in, Mark, to identity. Because when St. John Paul speaks about Adam in search of his identity, Adam was before God in search of his identity. And so when you're rightly so showing the two extremes, do either of those extremes go before God in search of their identity? No. And so that's another thing I think that Theology of the Body brings to us, is that. And, another thing we could add to it is Pope John Paul speaks in another of his work of a person as a being for another. So that's hyphenated, being for another. And so to think that I just withdraw and look into my own feelings and find my own identity. No, we find our identity, as Gaudium et Spes says, through the gift of self. I am a being for another. And so that makes all the difference in the world when I'm trying to discover who I am. In other words, the more we love with God's love, the more we're going to find out the truth of our deepest identity being really children of God, sons and daughters of God. So wonderful. Love Theology of the Body so much.
And that axiom is the fundamental thrust of the Theology of the Body. This notion of self-gift as the call of human nature by itself, that even at the level of natural law, that man only truly finds himself, and more than that, also his place in society and his interrelated reality with other fellow man, fellow women. Man only truly finds himself when he makes a complete gift of himself to the other. And it's the encapsulation of this that helps us understand not just the purpose of the body, but the purpose of the person itself. And all of this is expressed truly through the expressiveness of the body, and there's an eternal quality to this.
Yeah, I love it. One of the smallest phrases in the Theology of the Body that I love, Pope John Paul puts into the mouth of Adam when Pope John Paul is kind of imagining that when Adam, sees Eve. Here's the direct quote from the Theology of the Body. Look, a body that reveals the person. So he sees Eve naked and unashamed. He sees her body as a revelation. That's the way Pope John Paul puts it, a revelation of Eve, of her. And then they know, because of the body, that they are meant for love. Why? Because the bodies are directed toward each other. Pope John Paul calls this the hermeneutics of the gift, whereby the logic of our bodies say, I belong to you. And we could say that through, I like first starting off on a human level, Mark, because I, as a woman who's single, never been married, never had children, I live the Theology of the Body by, like right now, my body is directed toward your listener's body because my vocal cords are directed toward the eardrums of you and your listeners. And then you receive from me your body through your eardrums, and then hopefully you're trying to learn, and then we're bonded together more. That's how we're made in God's image and likeness the most, when we love. But we cannot love except through our bodies. This side of eternity, and even that side of eternity when Jesus comes back again, we'll get our bodies back. That's the third chapter of the Theology of the Body. But what I love so much about what you said is, that gift of self is how we find meaning. But let's not forget to start with just on a human level. Pope John Paul speaks about Adam seeing Eve, and they are of the same nature. That's the first thing they notice, both human. And again, with identity, we've squelched our identity and our human nature in this modern culture. And so we need to gain that back, and then we could build on that to the area of sexuality, where they also notice that they're distinct enough from each other, complementary in their very bodies, that they know that they are meant for love. I love giving talks about the body as a gospel. If you gave me 4 words to say what the gospel is, besides, of course, Jesus and the church, I would say love for fruitful union. There it is. That's the gospel. If you gave me 4 words to describe marriage, love for fruitful union. And those paralleling each other helps us to understand, when we get marriage and family right, which has to do with the body, then we're going to get our understanding of Christianity right. And I'm afraid that's one of the reasons why people are moving away from the churches, because they don't understand the truth of the human person, and then to build on that, the truth of what it means to be in a marital relationship, which is free, full, faithful, and fruitful. Wow, I could go on and on. I hope I'm not speaking too much about all of that, but
well, no, not
so
at all.
Excited about this.
Well, Monica, I want to say thank you so much for making the time to speak with us and to share all this with us.
You're welcome. I love it so much. And I mean, with my talks, it's like, how do you know you're human? How do you know you're hungry? How do you know? And the answer is the body. And we could say that to the youngest child. And it might seem like, why would you do that? Because the body does matter. And it brings the children into a sacramental view of reality. And so the body does indeed matter. So thank you for allowing me to be with you.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you. My guest, Monica Ashour, President, Co-founder, International Speaker for Theology of the Body Evangelization Team. As we round off this conversation and this hour, I want to draw our attention to that fundamental reality that the human person becomes a true reflection of the divine image. We are bearers of the image of God. And so, as Monica was saying earlier, and as we consider the words of John Paul II, this consideration of the fact that we want to be careful here. We're not just enfleshed souls. We're not just spirited bodies. We are both and one. And so the encounter of the human person and this realization that every human person is therefore sacramental in a lowercase s means that there's a heavenly call and a heavenly dignity to which we ought to strive. And as we consider the theology of the body, one of the great ways in which we can encounter it and study it well is to see that this is a true response of the Holy Spirit that we can be grateful for from the pedagogy of a pope that many of us knew in our lifetime, in terms of answering the heinous evils of wanton depravity in sexualization of the human person. Because the lie of sexual liberation has only engendered true misery in the public sphere. And so the response of it is the reclamation of the full dignity of the human person. And yes, the dignity of the body as having a divine imprint. Male and female, he created them. And this is the call, that in that complementarity, man and woman truly come to experience this foretaste of Trinitarian intimacy in heaven here on earth. And that, my friends, is the wondrous teaching of the theology of the body. Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. Until next time, God bless you and keep you always. I'm Marcus Peter.